Hello friends, my name is AJ and welcome to the 6th 2020 AP Computer Science Free Response Question Practice. Today we're going to be going over question number 3 from the 2017 released AP Computer Science exam, FRQ exam. And this question is going to be based on the methods and control structures type of question, which is going to be the second question on the 2020 AP exam. Without further ado, let's get started. Alright, so the question says, and by the way, I will have the link to this particular practice test. It's an official one by the College Board. It will be inside of the comment section below, probably in a pinned comment. So it says, this question involves analyzing and modifying a string. So actually the first thing I want to say is that this particular question is unique compared to previous ones in the past, because in the other types of methods and control structures type of questions, there are a lot of math things and kind of loops and if statements and stuff. However, this particular question is specifically on strings, which is why I think it's really unique, and it's definitely, for string practice, it's definitely very, very useful. So it says, the following phrase class maintains a phrase in an instance variable and has methods that access and make changes to the phrase. You will write two methods of the phrase class. So you can see right here, I have my phrase class, and we have, remember, three parts to a class. We have fields, we have constructor, and we have the method. So let's look at them. And again, I always recommend this because, as you're trying to read through the question, you no matter what FRQ question you have, you should have an understanding of the class that you're actually working in. So the first thing is I have a field. I have a current phrase field, and it is a string right here. And the current phrase field will hold the actual phrase that we are trying to, work with or manipulate. And then here you have the constructor for the phrase object, which takes in an input string called P, and then initializes the current phrase field with the value here. And then we have a few fields. So the first one says, and this is called find nth occurrence, and it returns an integer. It says that it returns the index of the nth occurrence of string in the current phrase. Returns -1 if the occurrence does not exist. Okay? So what this basically does is it's going to look for a specific occurrence of a certain substring within the main string or the main current phrase. And that is what this is going to do. And you can see here that the precondition is that there is this string. Basically, the length of the string is greater than 0, and the occurrence is greater than 0, the actual occurrence of what you're trying to look for. And then the postcondition is that the phrase is not modified in any way by this method. Then the second method, which is to be implemented in part A, so this is the one that we're going to be trying to solve. This one is called replace nth occurrence. So this is a void function, which means that it's not going to return anything, and it takes 3 parameters. It says that this function modifies the current phrase by replacing the nth occurrence of string with REPL. So what this basically is saying, and it also says if the nth occurrence does not exist, the current phrase is unchanged. So basically what this is saying is that it's going to look for a certain occurrence of the string input parameter. And it's going to replace that string with the replacement string, which is the third parameter for the method. Okay, so this is what we're going to be working with next. And before I kind of move on, I am just going to go over part B, just so that later on don't forget it. And it says that the method that will be implemented in part B is called find last occurrence, and it is going to return an integer. It's going to return the index of the last occurrence of the string parameter in the current phrase, and it's going to return -1 if it is not found. All right, so here, and we can skip over the toString. We don't necessarily need this, but it does return a string containing the current phrase. All right, so let's go to part A. It says write the phrase method replace nth occurrence, which will replace the nth occurrence of the string str with the string REPL. If the nth occurrence does not exist, the current frames remain unchanged. Again, this is pretty much from the comment above. And then it gives a bunch of examples. And I definitely always recommend when they give examples, look at the examples, try to understand what happens in these examples. And the reason why I want to do this is simply because when you're solving the problem, it helps you get a better understanding of actually how to approach it and what needs to be done to solve it. So you can see that my first phrase segment right here, I have phrase 1 equals new phrase, and my phrase is a cat ate late. And then I run replace nth occurrence. My str input is at, the nth occurrence is 1, and my replacement string is rain. So you can see that what it actually does is, and my output is a crane ate late. So what it does is it looks for the, right here, the AT. And you can see that there are actually 3 ATs inside of my original phrase. Then what it's going to do is it's going to find the first occurrence of it. So it's going to take this one right here, the first occurrence of AT. And then what it's going to do is it's going to replace it with this new replacement string right here. So you can see that where it was AT, it's now RANE. So now it's a crane ate late rather than a cat ate late. And now we can look at another example. We have the exact same phrase again and the same input string, but this time we have the occurrence of 6 and the replacement string of XX. Now, if you look at this, you know that, okay, well, we can look at the occurrences at AT. There's one occurrence here, a second occurrence, and a third occurrence. But there are not 6 occurrences, right? So it's going to look for a 6th occurrence, which does not exist. And because it does not exist, the string remains unchanged, okay? Now, another thing that I want to mention is going to be in the third example. You can see here the replace occurrence is the string to replace is bat, and there are no occurrences. So also it remains unchanged. And then you can see here, which is very interesting. So this happens if there are multiple occurrences, like kind of that overlap, right? Because for AA, there's an occurrence here, AA, but there's also an occurrence with my second A. So it's AA here, but then a second occurrence here, and then a third occurrence here. A lot of people may accidentally think that, well, this is just one occurrence and a second occurrence, but if you really think about it, it's one occurrence here, and then one occurrence here. So it takes the first occurrence, which are these 2 letters, and replaces it with the 2 X's. Then over here, you can see that this time I'm replacing the second occurrence with BBB, so it's actually going to replace right here, AA, with BBB. All right, so now that we know and we have a bunch of examples to work with and we now kind of understand what we have to do, let's actually work on solving it. So let's think about what we need to do, right? The first thing that we need to do is we need to find the occurrence, right? The actual occurrence of my string and where it's located. Well, we're actually given a helper method right here. We're given the find nth occurrence method. And the find nth occurrence method can actually be used, and you can see here that it returns the nth occurrence of a given string. So we can actually use this to find where we need to start replacing. So I'm going to have an open and close parentheses, and I'm going to add a comment at the end of this. Sorry, it's not parentheses, it's braces. I'm going to do // and I will say method here. Again, I'm adding a comment at the closing brace so that we know that this particular curling brace is tied to a method. Okay, so now we're going to want to find the location of the string that we want to replace. So I can say int index of string equals, and now I can set it equal to find nth occurrence, just like this. And my find nth occurrence method takes in 2 parameters, as you can see up here. It takes in the string that I'm trying to find, and then the occurrence in which I'm trying to find it for. So, well, I know that the string that I'm trying to find is the str parameter because that's what I'm trying to find and to replace. So I can actually type in str as my first parameter for the find nth occurrence method. And then the occurrence in which I want to replace it for is just n. Also this input right over here. So now this is the location of where I want to start replacing, right? And so now all we have to do is we have to change my current phrase variable, or my current phrase field up here, with the one where it replaces the str, or replaces the occurrence of str with my replacement string. So to do this, we have to think about how do we want to actually replace the string, or the replacement string inside of my overall phrase. Right? So if I, again, take my first example here, you can see that I'm trying to replace, for example, this AT here with rain. So how do I actually do that? Well, the first thing is, if we want to get rid of the AT and we want to replace, or we want to add in this rain in here, the first thing that we can do is we can get the first part of the string, right? What is preceding the place I want to actually start replacing. And the reason I want to do this is that I can start my string with this, and then I can add onto it my new replacement. So instead of it then being a cat, right, it would just be A space C plus the RANE, and it would effectively add my specific replacement string in here. So what I can do is I can say string leading str, right, to say that it's a leading string, equals, and then I have to say this dot current phrase to get the actual field, right, dot, and then we can use the string method of substring. And substring allows us, again, to specifically cut a part of it, or get a specific portion of a string out of an original string. And if you don't remember the different string methods, they're actually listed on your Java reference sheet. And on the AP exam, you will be allowed to use that Java reference sheet. So I definitely recommend having a printout of that. And it's very, very useful because it will tell you, for example, all the different methods for the string class, and it will even tell you the parameters that you need. So the two parameters for substring is where I want to start my substring and where I want to end my substring. And again, the numbers that I put in there are going to be indexes. So if I want to start at the beginning of the string and go to the position where my this str, or the thing that I want to replace, is actually located, my first index would be 0. Because I'm trying to start at the beginning. Remember, with strings, indexes do not start at 1, they start at 0. And then where I stop my substring is actually simply going to be index of string. Just like that. And why is it there? It's because, again, I'm trying to go from my starting point of my string all the way to the beginning of what I'm trying to replace. Now, the next thing I need to do is I need to add my trailing string. And the trailing string is all the text after where I want to start replacing, as you can see right over here, right? Because if you notice, it's right here, right? If I'm trying to replace my AT, then and I actually do, for example, AC, and then I add rain to it, so it becomes a crane, I now need to add the rest of the sentence back on. So I need that trailing string. And I'm basically going to get a substring, again, of current phrase. So I say this dot current phrase, just like this. And now, where do I actually want, I have to do dot substring, because again, I'm trying to find a portion of my original string. But now, where do I start my substring, right? Where do I actually want to start this substring? Well, let's think about what we can work with, right? We know the location of the actual thing that we're trying to replace. So if we take the location of where the replacement string starts, which would be right here where my cursor is, right before the A in the highlighted section, and then I add onto it the length of that text that I'm trying to replace, AT, you can see that my cursor will move from the beginning of this particular replacement string to the end of it right here. And this is the location where we want to start, and then we take it from here all the way to the end of the string. So to do this, I can simply say index of string plus the str.length, right? And the str.length is again referring to the length of my replacement string. And this is getting a little long, so I may make this just a little bit bigger. I still want everyone to be able to see the question, but I also want to make sure that you see all of the code. Okay, I think this should work for now. Doing some resizing. So oftentimes when we're working with strings, it kind of goes over off the side of the page because of the amount of methods that we put, and sometimes we put methods in methods, such as the length here inside of the substring. All right, so now that we know the leading and the trailing string, all we have to do now is we have to put everything together. And to do this, I can simply say this dot current phrase, which is what I'm trying to change, equals my leading string plus my REPL, or the string that I'm trying to replace, or the new replacement for my original text that I was trying to replace, plus my trailing string, just like that. And then all I have to do is I simply put a semicolon, and there you have it. Now the current phrase field has been modified. When you just in the way in this example, it looks for a specific occurrence of a certain string and then replaces that occurrence with a new replacement string. Now the last thing that I want to mention, and because this works for everything except for one specific situation, right, which is in our question over here. What if my index of string, or the occurrence, if there is no occurrence, right, then my index of string is going to be set to -1 because there is no specific, like it cannot find this string ever inside of my current phrase. So to do this, I basically want to skip, right? I only want to run this code over here where I actually replace the current phrase. I only want to run that if my current index of string is basically not -1. Because if it is -1, that means that it does not exist. The actual substring does not exist in my original string, so I can't replace it, right? I can't replace something that does not exist. So to do this, I can say if my index of string is not equal to -1, then I can do all of this code. So I just basically have to wrap all of this inside of my if statement right here. And unfortunately, I will have to index it, or I will have to add a little indent again, so it may go slightly off the page. But that is pretty much it. And now this code will work, and it follows the directions, right? If the occurrence does not exist, it's not going to modify the string at all. But if the occurrence does exist, it's simply going to replace that occurrence with my REPL string. And that is the solution for part A. And the thing again that I like about this question is simply because you're using string methods, and string methods, you know, you don't usually, especially if you look at 2019 and 2018, the methods and control structures questions from those two tests that I've gone over in the previous videos in this particular series of this review, there has not been really a string heavy question. This is kind of the first one, so it's very good practice, okay, for working with strings. Because strings are technically could be covered under the methods and control structures type of question, because string methods are that it falls into that methods category. So now we can look at part B, which says write the phrase method find last occurrence. This method finds and returns the index of the last occurrence in a given string. So if the string is not found, -1 is returned, and then the following tables show several examples of the behavior method. So now you can see here that it says that there is find last occurrence. And basically what you're doing is you're finding the location of the last occurrence. If you look at what the find nth occurrence method does, it finds a specific occurrence based on the input number, right? But what if I want to find that last occurrence? Because I don't know which like in terms of which number or which specific occurrence is the last one. I don't know that. I'm just trying to find the last occurrence. So we have to write a method that does that for us so that we do not have to know what number the last occurrence actually is. And instead, it will just take out all of that guessing and it will return us the index of the last occurrence of that string. All right, so and then that is the question. You must use find nth occurrence again to receive full credit. So this one, we should think about it a little bit logically and how we actually want to answer this. So the first thing is that if my, what should I say? I want to start looking for my specific values, right? And I want to repeatedly, right? If you want to think about this, if I'm trying to find the last occurrence, I need to keep running my find nth occurrence method repeatedly until I get to the last one and I can go no further, okay? And that is in a sense what we have to do. So how would we write that in an algorithm so we'd be able to return that final occurrence? Well, if you think about it, again, the keywords there that I was saying was that I am trying to repeatedly run, right? Find nth occurrence. So when we talk about repeatedly, again, we're talking about iteration, and we can repeat code using two different things. We can use the while loop and we can use the for loop. Okay? The while loop allows us to run code while a certain condition is true. And the for loop allows us to run code for a certain number of times that we already know. In this case, if you think about it, do I know how many times I need to repeat my nth occurrence, that find nth occurrence? Well, I don't, right? Because I don't know what number of, like, how many times I can actually look through a string and find the substring. I don't know how many times that is. So the for loop would not be the best type of loop for this scenario. So we're left with a while loop. And that is how we're going to have to loop and continuously repeat the find nth occurrence method. Okay? So now, if by knowing this, I now need to think about what I need to put inside of my while loop, right? Because while loops have certain conditions, right? Basically, it keeps repeating the code until something is not true. And really, what I want to do is how many times do I want to repeat? I want to keep repeating, right? Keep repeating my loop while, or until rather, I'll use the word until. I want to keep repeating my loop until the find nth occurrence returns -1. Why do I want it to return -1? Well, returning -1 basically means that it could not find another occurrence. So I want to keep finding for example, the first occurrence, and the second occurrence, then the third occurrence, and I want to keep increasing that until I finally get to a point where I do not find another occurrence. Because that will then let me know that the previous check that I did, or the previous number, was the last occurrence, and that is what I need to find. So if I want to keep repeating while the nth occurrence, or until the nth occurrence returns 1, then inside of my condition for my while loop, I can say that I want to repeat while my find nth occurrence is going to not equal 1. That is essentially what I want to do. And the parameters in here we will figure out next. So I want to repeat it while it is not equal to -1. All right, so this is now enough of an algorithm, and we really thought about how we want to solve the problem. Now we can jump in actually writing the code. So I'm going to have the open and close braces here, and I will again add my comment here method to show that this matches up with this particular curly brace, and now we want to write our loop. But before we write our loop, we need to now think about what parameters I actually want to put inside of my nth occurrence. So when I say while, right, find nth occurrence is not equal to -1, that's my header for my while loop. I need two parameters for my find nth occurrence. Remember, my first parameter will find a certain string, right? And the string that I want to actually find is already in the parameter for the find last occurrence method. So I can simply type in str again here. So because I'm just using the parameter for the find last occurrence and I'm using it inside of find nth occurrence. But now what number do I want to actually use? Right? Because if I keep a static number, let's say I just put 1 here, just as an example, this will find the first occurrence of this string. But every time I repeat my code, I need to somehow increase this number. I can't keep it as a static one, otherwise it's going to repeat forever, right? So what I actually need to do is I need to put this as a variable. So I can say, for example, n, right? Just some sort of number, actually even I. I is often used in for loops. Let's just use it here to keep consistency with that. And now I need to initialize my variable up here. So I can say ni equals, for example, 1, right? And now I can have an open and close parentheses. Because then the reason why I start this at 1 is because I want to first find the first occurrence inside of my string. And then inside of my while loop, right? If this repeats and it was found inside of my string, then I simply want to add 1 to my counter right here. Now the thing is, which is something I do want to mention, is what do I actually want to return here? Well, I want to return the last occurrence, or the location of this string, the last occurrence of that string. So to do this, I have to do return find nth occurrence again, str, but this time I know what the last position of the last occurrence possible for my string is, because that's what this finds up here, and it's simply going to be I. This I is what pretty much we were trying to look for. That's the reason why we had to create this function in the first place, in order to find which occurrence is actually the last one, then you return the location of that. Now the last thing I want to mention here is what if I, or my first occurrence, was equal to -1, right? Will this return? Well, it will return even still, because even if I have an I here, it's going to find the first occurrence, and if it's not equal to -1, it's simply going to return -1 right here. And that pretty much should solve the problem. Alright everyone, if you liked the video, feel free to like and subscribe for more content. And as always, thanks for watching. More AP Computer Science review may be coming very soon.